On a chilly 1950s morning, a small terraced home might already be alive with quiet purpose. The kettle's gentle whistle drifted through the hallway, and children stood in a neat line by the door, inspecting their polished shoes as if preparing for inspection at a grand parade. There was no rushing, no last-minute chaos, just the steady rhythm of a household that lived by rules everyone understood. And one of those rules would surprise families today. Children weren't allowed to leave the house until every button on their coat was fastened perfectly, top to bottom, no exceptions. It didn't matter if they were running late or if a neighbor was already calling them outside. Back then, order came first. Most families today would never imagine this was normal. Yet for that generation, it was simply how mornings began, setting the tone for everything that followed. To understand those strict little rules of childhood, you have to picture Britain in the years after the war, when the country was quietly stitching itself back together. Rationing had only recently faded, yet the habits it created lingered in every kitchen cupboard and every careful decision parents made. Families lived simply, not out of choice, but because that was the only way forward. Discipline, respect, and routine weren't ideals. They were survival skills learned from years of making do. Neighborhoods were tight-knit, the kind where everyone knew the sound of your front gate. You'd hear the clatter of a coal delivery rattling down the street, or the hum of a prom being pushed over uneven pavements. Children wore starched school uniforms that felt slightly stiff against the skin, a reminder that appearance mattered even when pockets were nearly empty. And with fewer distractions at home, children spent most of their time learning independence outdoors, guided as much by neighbors as by their own parents. In this world of limited resources but strong community spirit, parenting naturally took a firmer, more structured shape, and it's this foundation that explains why so many of those old rules existed in the first place. If there was one thing nearly every 1950s household shared, it was routine, firm, predictable, and followed almost without question. Children were often up before the sun had fully lifted, rubbing their eyes as the cold air of the hallway crept beneath their bedroom doors. The first task was simple but essential: straighten the bed, smooth the blanket, and make the room presentable before stepping downstairs. In most homes, polished shoes waited by the mat, lined up with quiet pride, because leaving the house looking untidy simply wasn't an option. The day moved to the rhythm of the home itself. You could smell morning toast crisping under the grill and hear the steady ticking of the hallway clock marking each moment. Parents expected children to help with small chores, sweeping the front step, folding freshly washed laundry, or setting the table with care. These weren't burdens, they were lessons. Families believed routine built strong character, teaching children that responsibility began with the little things. Mealtimes arrived like clockwork, everyone seated together, no wandering between rooms. And through it all, the soundscape of home, footsteps on wooden floors, distant chatter from neighbors created a world where discipline wasn't stern, just steady. It set the tone for childhood long before the day had even begun. One of the most striking differences between then and now was the simple expectation that children were part of the household team. In 1950s Britain, you didn't just live under the roof, you contributed to it. Helping carry shopping bags home from the corner shop, assisting with the washing up after tea, or running small errands to a neighbor's doorstep were all seen as ordinary parts of growing up. No one thought twice about it because these tasks were woven into daily life as naturally as brushing your hair before school. Today, childhood often leans more toward comfort and convenience, with many families focusing on ease rather than shared responsibility. But back then, being trusted with a small job felt almost like a rite of passage. A child might beam with quiet pride after carefully drying dishes or handing over a safely delivered note. It wasn't about pressure, it was about belonging. These responsibilities taught young people that their actions mattered, that they were useful, capable, and genuinely needed. And that feeling of being relied upon, even in a small way, shaped confidence long before any formal lesson ever could. Carrying them steadily into the wider world beyond the front door, step outside the front door in 1950s Britain, and the expectations followed you just as firmly as they did at home. Children were taught that public spaces were shared spaces, and that meant behaving with a certain quiet dignity. A polite greeting for neighbors, a gentle nod to an older passerby, and a soft thank you at the corner shop were all second nature. In queues, and there were plenty of them, children stood patiently, hands by their sides, waiting without drifting, fidgeting, or narrating their thoughts to the entire street. Family outings reflected a kind of structured gentleness, whether it was a walk to the park, a visit to the high street, or a bus ride into town. Children followed a simple rule: stay close, stay calm, and let the adults lead. And adults, in return, modeled the kind of behavior they hoped their children would grow into. The contrast today can feel almost humorous. Imagine expecting a modern child to wait silently through an entire supermarket trip without a single question or comment. But back then, this quiet respect for public spaces wasn't about sternness. It was about teaching children how to move through the world with awareness, a lesson that lingered long after the outing ended and the family returned home. If there was one place where 1950s childhood truly came alive, it was outdoors. The moment school shoes were off and a quick bite was eaten, children spilled into parks, quiet streets, and open fields as though the world belonged entirely to them. Neighborhood games sparked up without planning, a ball rolling across the road, a chalk line on the pavement, or a shout from a friend 2 doors down was all it took to begin an afternoon of adventure. Out there, confidence took root. Children learned to navigate winding lanes, recognize familiar landmarks, and negotiate the unspoken rules of play. Every outing offered new social lessons: sharing, swapping, including, and sometimes compromising. The world felt slower, safer, and shaped by the gentle watchfulness of the community. Neighbors didn't hover, but they noticed. A nod from a front garden or a wave from an upstairs window was enough to let parents know everything was fine. The contrast to today is striking. Now, most outdoor moments are carefully supervised, planned, and monitored. Back then, the streets were our playgrounds, the fields were our kingdoms, and the neighbors were our guardians, creating a childhood freedom that shaped resilience long before we ever understood its value. Looking back, it becomes clear that those strict little rules weren't simply about order. They were expressions of love shaped by the times. Parents had lived through years of uncertainty, so creating structure wasn't just habit, it was a way to give their children stability in a world still finding its footing. The routines, the responsibilities, the manners in public, they all offered a sense of safety and belonging, even if they felt firm at the time. And the freedom children found outdoors built a quiet resilience, teaching them to solve problems, make friends, and discover themselves without constant guidance. Today, life feels softer in many ways. Technology brings instant comfort. Homes are filled with conveniences, and parenting often focuses on emotional reassurance and flexibility. We celebrate creativity, independence of thought, and personal expression far more openly than families could in the 1950s. Yet something about that older world, its discipline, its community spirit, its shared responsibility, still speaks deeply to us. It reminds us of a Britain built on togetherness, where neighbors looked out for one another and children learned by doing. Both eras carry their strengths. Modern childhood offers opportunities that would have felt unimaginable back then, while the past offers lessons in patience, gratitude, and connection. And perhaps that's the heart of it. Families did the best they could with what they had, and the memories left behind continue to shape who we are long after the rules themselves have faded. Wait, if you grew up in Old Britain, you'll want to see what I couldn't include in this video. I've posted the deeper story and extra memories on WhatsApp channel. The link is in the description. Join us there. For more of these unbelievable memories, tap the video on your screen. The 1970s stories are something else. Don't forget to subscribe.